Little House on the Prairie is a reminder of when things were simpler for us in our lives those 45 years ago.
Why? Melissa Gilbert breaks silence about Dean Butler. No one was supposed to talk about this. For nearly 50 years, fans of Little House on the Prairie believed they understood the love story between Laura Ingalls and Almanzo Wilder. They watched Melissa Gilbert and Dean Butler fall in love on screen, get married in a wheat field, and become one of the most beloved couples in television history. But in late 2025, Melissa Gilbert posted something online that made people look at those old episodes completely differently. She wasn't talking about romance anymore. She was talking about being a child. And what she said, and what Dean Butler said right back, has changed how an entire generation remembers that show. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. When Dean Butler joined Little House on the Prairie in its 6th season to play Almanzo Wilder, he was 23 years old. Melissa Gilbert, the girl he was about to kiss on national television as part of the storyline, was 15. That's not a rumor. That's not tabloid speculation. That's a documented fact that both of them have now confirmed themselves, decades after the cameras stopped rolling. For years, the show's most iconic romance played out exactly the way the network wanted it to. Audiences fell for it completely. They wrote letters asking for more scenes together. They treated the wedding episode like a real event in their own lives. And because Melissa and Dean never talked publicly about how strange that dynamic actually felt behind the scenes, viewers were free to imagine whatever they wanted. Nobody knew what it was really like for a teenage girl to be scripted into a grown man's love story, filmed for millions of homes to watch every week. That silence lasted for decades. Then, in November 2025, Melissa Gilbert broke it. Not in an interview, not in a new memoir chapter, but in a direct, public post responding to a wave of women online sharing the hashtags #WAS15 and I was a child. Gilbert stepped into that conversation and said plainly that she had been 15 years old herself when she was expected to play a romantic, grown-up storyline opposite a 23-year-old man. She didn't frame it as a scandal. She framed it as something she survived. She credited her mother and her TV father, Michael Landon, with protecting her through it, and she said she felt fortunate because she knew that many other young women in similar situations never had anyone looking out for them at all. That single post did something remarkable. It didn't just reopen an old conversation about the show. It gave Dean Butler an opening to finally say something too. About a month later, Butler sat down for the Little House on the Prairie 50th Anniversary podcast alongside his former co-star Allison Arngrim, who played Nellie Olson. When the host read a fan question asking how he felt about the age gap between himself and Gilbert, Butler didn't dodge it. He acknowledged that at the time, he tried not to think too hard about the difference between a 23-year-old man and a 15-year-old girl being pushed into an on-screen romance. But he also said something that mattered a lot more. He said that today, an 8-year gap between two adults in their 60s is nothing. Back then, at 15 and 23, it was enormous. He didn't try to excuse it. He just admitted plainly that it was a big deal. This wasn't the first time Butler had opened up about it either. Back in 2024, he published his own memoir called Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond. In it, he wrote about a moment on set that most fans never knew happened. During the filming of one of Laura and Almanzo's romantic scenes, Gilbert's mother, Barbara, was standing nearby, and she started crying. It caught everyone off guard. Nothing like that had happened on set before. Michael Landon, who was directing, immediately called cut. Butler later reflected on why her mother reacted that way, describing it as a kind of protective heartbreak, a mother struggling to watch her young daughter being kissed by an adult actor for a television audience. Butler also wrote about how differently he and Gilbert experienced those years. He described her as remarkably skilled as an actress, someone who had already spent years mastering her craft on that set. But he also said that as a young woman, she was still deeply inexperienced, someone who trusted the adults around her completely because she had no reason not to. He said it was harder for her than it was for him, and he meant that seriously. What makes this story land so differently now is that Melissa Gilbert has talked about her side of it too, in her own memoir, Prairie Tale. She described meeting Dean Butler for the first time and feeling an overwhelming rush of emotions, none of them romantic. Fear, disappointment, even nausea. She wasn't meeting a leading man. She was a teenager being told that this stranger, a full-grown adult, was about to become her on-screen husband. She has said she called Butler afterward, genuinely unsure how she was supposed to pull off playing a woman in love when she hadn't even been on a real date yet. So here's the truth that fans spent decades not knowing. The chemistry everyone swore they saw on screen wasn't romance. It was two professionals, one of them still a child by any reasonable definition, doing their jobs under a system that didn't think twice about putting a 15-year-old in that position. Dean Butler has said the age difference in the storyline actually matched the real Ingalls family history fairly closely. In Laura Ingalls Wilder's actual books, Almanzo was about 10 years older than Laura when they married, and he was 28 while she was 18. The show's producers leaned on that historical detail to justify the casting. But there's a difference between two adults with a 10-year gap and a 15-year-old actress being filmed in romantic scenes with a 23-year-old man for a network drama. Butler has pointed out that at the time, there were letters. Mothers wrote to the network expressing concern about exactly this pairing. He's acknowledged that people who knew the books understood the historical basis for the age difference, and that the show handled it carefully enough that it didn't generate more backlash than it did. But not more backlash than it could have is not the same thing as this was fine. And in 2025, with an entire cultural conversation happening around women speaking up about experiences they went through as teenagers in the entertainment industry, Melissa Gilbert decided it was time to say so herself, publicly, in her own words. What's striking is how differently these two people have chosen to look back on it. Gilbert's post wasn't bitter. It wasn't an accusation aimed at Butler personally. She specifically credited the adults who did protect her, her mother and Michael Landon, for making sure she came through those years safely. Butler, for his part, didn't get defensive when the subject came back around. He didn't try to minimize what she said. He validated it on a podcast, in front of an audience of longtime fans who grew up believing Laura and Almanzo's love story was simply romantic television history. That's really what makes this moment different from just another celebrity gossip cycle. Nobody involved is claiming there was a secret real-life romance. Nobody is accusing anyone of wrongdoing in a criminal sense. What's actually happening is more complicated and, honestly, more important. Two people who spent 9 seasons pretending to be in love on camera are now, decades later, telling the truth about how uncomfortable and strange that experience actually was, and how much responsibility rested on the adults around them to keep a child actress safe while the cameras rolled. It's worth remembering what Little House on the Prairie meant to people. It wasn't just a show about a family on the frontier. It was about resilience, about a family that stuck together through hardship, about a little girl named Laura who had curiosity and heart even when life was hard. Melissa Gilbert carried that character for 9 years, growing up in front of millions of viewers who felt like they knew her personally. When the show introduced Almanzo and pushed Laura into a grown-up romance storyline, the audience went right along with it because they already loved her. They wanted to see her happy. Nobody was thinking about what that meant for the real 15-year-old girl playing the part. Now, with Melissa Gilbert speaking plainly about being a child in that position, and Dean Butler backing up how real the discomfort was, the show's most famous romance gets a more honest chapter added to it. Not a scandal. Not a secret affair fans somehow missed. Just the truth, finally spoken out loud by the two people who lived it, about what it actually costs a young performer to carry a storyline like that, and how much it mattered that the adults around her, her mother and Michael Landon, were paying attention. That's the real story behind the romance everyone thought they understood. Not a hidden love affair. Not years of suppressed feelings finally coming out. Just two honest people looking back on their own history and finally telling it the way it actually happened. What do you think about what Melissa Gilbert and Dean Butler have shared about their time on the show? Let us know in the comments below.